I'll start Chapter 9 in about 30 seconds, but before I do that, it appears, per what you're seeing in front of you on the screen, Bill has reconciled the number or the statistical discrepancy that we looked at yesterday associated with the Battle of Gettysburg and how the Taj Mahal in northern India was constructed in the early 1600s. This appears to be a breakthrough of such magnitude that if Bill was attending Princeton alongside John Nash, featured in the movie with Russell Crowe, A Beautiful Mind, Bill would receive the Wheeler Labs placement instead of John and end up getting the Nobel Prize. Thank you, Bill, for this unprecedented breakthrough. Chapter 9. All aspects of Earth life must be taken seriously for many decades for this game to be played properly. We must start off blind and wander the world dumb. For the life experience to work, you can't have any foreknowledge of the conclusion or who you really are. But maybe one side of this game is playing it too well. Our adversary should receive the Golden Baphomet Award. Look around at all the zombies at the mall. One side of this game appears to be dominating. The people walking by you at the mall couldn't be any more spiritually destitute. From birth, this reality breeds the false self, and to most people, that's all that exists in them. In high school, I remember myself watching a movie with Rob Lowe and thinking he was really cool. How sad is that? We were all lost sheep at one point in our lives. What makes our tiny group here different is we're actually trying to overcome the illusion, while your best friends are trying to merge with it. So we were born Tommy, the deaf, dumb, and spiritually blind kid. Our parents helped us cement the illusion by giving us the same false speeches that their own parents gave them. The cycle of blind and stupid goes back a long time. Then the purpose of grade school was to confuse you even further, so you make the most useless pursuits in your life your top priorities. Let's examine the famous board game called Trivial Pursuit. What are the categories for the questions? It's all the bullshit the screen assigns as important. That is not important. History, sports and leisure, geography, arts, sciences. Is there a category in the game called Timeless Self? How about incorporeal existence, or anything at all that's remotely consequential? Nope, I didn't think so. There's truth in every major presentation from the screen. What's the game itself called again? Trivial Pursuit. That tells us if we become experts in the categories on the cards, it's all trivial bullshit in life and you wasted your time. Monopoly is also a massive truth drop, as is the very first board game, not coincidentally called The Game of Life. Heck, the game Chutes and Ladders could be a truth drop. The card game where it's almost impossible to win, just trading cards back and forth with heavy losses, is called War. This world has many examples of fundamental truth buried in the absurd. No real world could keep doing that. At a very young age, we learn to fear death, which is the biggest ruse of all. There are still a few cultures on Earth that celebrate death, as it should be. The child, aged 10, is taken to his grandmother's funeral. He looks around and sees all the people crying and wearing black. He says to himself, I've never been to a funeral before. This death thing seems really bad. I'm young, but they say I'm going to end up dead too, someday, just like Granny over there in the open casket. Why'd they have to open it up? Like we ain't going to believe she's really dead in there if it's closed? These crying adults know more than I do, though, so the person in that coffin must really be screwed or something. Everybody at this funeral is so upset and crying and wailing and sobbing. Well, I don't get it, though, because they tell me Granny's in heaven. Isn't that a really good thing? Shouldn't all these adults around me be happy for Granny? Shortly after, the child leaves the funeral, confused and fucked up. People have the gall to tell me that those attending the funeral are crying because the person in the casket will be missed. Sure, that may be a factor, but it's mostly BS. If the loved ones at the funeral really believed Granny is being rewarded in an unimaginable paradise, would they really be so upset? Of course not. They may miss Granny's home cooking, but they'd be very happy for Granny if they were 100% confident that she was in heaven. They cry at her funeral for two reasons. One, deep down, they have no confidence that Granny is experiencing paradise because their own beliefs are built on poor footing. Their unconscious mind senses Granny wasted her life by watching Fox News all day and may be inside the Bardos right now, running from demons spawned from her own self-reflection. 2, they cry for themselves at the funeral because they're staring at their own fate. Of course, that's a big part of it. They're McLovin' the world because they've centered the basis of their entire existence around this earthly identity and their straw man and their pronoun and sexual choices, etc., etc., the false self. Once again, they only seek the material side of the Vitruvian man. The spiritual arm was ripped off a long time ago. A few at the funeral cry for Granny because they sense her next life will be a can-can girl in Louisville just before the Civil War. A few years later, that same kid who attended Granny's funeral attends college for a much more sophisticated brainwashing. This one has to be paid for. $50,000 a year to be transformed into a poster child for liberalism. When he comes out of that place, he's at the pinnacle of being confused about what's important in life. At age 22, when he's not playing with himself, he's chasing the almighty dollar so he can try to swap his own hand for an unfamiliar one. Then an artificially engineered George Bush society makes sure that he, as an adult, doesn't learn anything worthwhile throughout his entire life. He passes into the moment of death as confused as Spike Lee at a Daughters of the Revolution convention. If you play the screen's game on its home field, it'll make you believe you're very smart and successful. It will reward you if you follow its plan. You will rack up points, called dollars, and you'll cash those chips in for sex acts and a new Nimbus 2000. If you don't play its game and don't run in its rat race to keep up with the Joneses, it will notice, and it will try to destroy you. If you think for yourself and walk your own path, it will bend you over its knee. If you keep researching what you should not be researching, your friends soon start to find you a bit odd. Those who play ball and march in a straight line in the direction the screen wants will be bestowed with awards, honors, medals, and plaques, so they believe they actually did something important in their life. On their headstone at the cemetery will be engraved with the eloquent prose that seems impressive, but really speaks to how fooled the person was in life. Here lies loving husband and senior partner at the Dewey, Cheatham & Howe law firm. Well, tell him what he's won, Johnny, for basing his entire sense of self-worth around being a partner in an asbestos law firm. Squat. He's won squat. A wasted life. Again, it's not the job itself that doomed this poor devil. It's what the man assigned as the foundation of himself. The false self took over and ripped off his own Vitruvian spiritual arm. It's the mantra of the new stalled century, isn't it? It's how he identified with the false self. If you've worked your entire life to please this system and you've been rewarded by the system with wealth, celebrity, awards, and cheers, there's little chance for spiritual success. I'm sorry for picking on the Dewey, Cheatham & Howe partner lawyer a few moments ago, but there are certain professions with more lost souls than others. Look at the Wall Street stockbroker, for example. How satisfying is it to bang on a keyboard all day, buying and selling blips? Actually, that's better than what they used to do last century, calling suckers on the phone and lying about the wonderful prospects of penny stocks. That's the pump and dump process shown in the Vin Diesel movie Boiler Room. The scammers watch it run up and then they sell at the top, causing the slide in the stock themselves, leaving the guy with the pregnant wife at home holding worthless certificates that he can't even use as toilet paper. He places them carefully to line the bunny cage. For your spiritual life journey to pay dividends, you must buy into every bit of this earth nonsense, at least for a few decades. So there's always hope for the stockbroker and the lawyer. The butterfly must first be the caterpillar, and the caterpillar plays the games of this reality. We were all fooled at one point, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. It's essential. Being a rich lawyer actually appealed to me as a young man, especially after I saw the Tom Cruise movie The Firm. I didn't care that his law firm was making people go kaput and dealing in dirty offshore accounts. It looked exciting to a young man like me in the early 90s. In the movie, I saw Tom Cruise, a young lawyer. He got the girl, he got the money, and he took trips with Gene Hackman to the Cayman Islands. What could be better than that? That's what I thought college was for. We've all been children of this matrix at some point. The key is, of course, can you come out of it? Can Sleeping Beauty wake up without a kiss from Nacho Libre? It's quite clear that our adversary keeps perfecting its tactics. The dark thing that squats over reality has almost everyone today interested in the worthless shit that it peddles, so people willingly choose the road most traveled. Presidents, Grammy Award winners, nationalism, space shuttles, celebrity flags, right down to your own job promotions and pronoun choices, it's all BS if it was spawned from the outer ring of reality that I call the screen. That is where most people's focus lies today, and that's where their aspirations lay. Or should I say lie, L-I-E. The natural world can be harsh and violent, but the original game board of Earth can also be very beautiful. The screen is the outer ring of reality that works its devious plans through society and culture. Everything around you, all of society, is the next ring down getting closer to your heart-centered reality bubble, or ring. It acts as a middleman for the screen. Those who believe in the culture and lifestyles that it puts forth become what we call minions. A minion is not just Melvin P. It's also your Aunt Ginny, if she has become the palace guard and a defender of this insane asylum. It seems like the societal infrastructure that has been built up around us in cities, states, and countries is the normal progression of modern man and the best we can do. That's wrong. At this point, everything in reality, other than your heart-based personal reality bubble and the natural world, is artificial. Everything else is artificial, right down to the fake meat in an Impossible Burger. The world would not look this way if everyone was trying their best and the system allowed good intention to succeed. Society is the byproduct of minions who serve the screen reality by willingly turning themselves to its frequency, and in doing that, they facilitate its master trick. Once people tune themselves to its radio station, then they will unknowingly serve the adversary of real people. Hundreds of millions have no idea how they're being used or what they're really working for in this game. If you are new to this talk of the screen or outer ring of reality, and that's confusing to you, just consider it to be like the concept of Satan. To a Christian, Satan does not appear before you. It doesn't walk the streets and enter the mall. It simply wields its influence through role players like George Soros and Alec Baldwin. This is how the screen works, through its minions. Notice I rarely mention the name Joe Biden when presenting a minion. He's too inconsequential, too much of a joke to take seriously. An entity called the Nothing in the never-ending story is a rudimentary way to understand what is going on here. The outer ring, or screen, slowly encroaches on the world toward your heart center, taking an inch of ground at a time. One tiny step, one small piece, as the Nothing creeped over Fantasia in the never-ending story. Your inner ring, called heart-centered reality, is very powerful and is partially responsible for generating reality itself. The rings get larger in size, traveling outward from you towards society, culture, and then all the way up to the screen itself as the final outer ring. As time goes by, the slow creep continues. The larger rings up from you fall further and further under the control of the outer ring, similar to the slow creep of the Nothing in the never-ending story. Think about, for example, walking into Times Square in 1940, what it looked like, versus what it looks like today. The slow creep of the Nothing. Technology is obviously one of its ways it creeps even faster today than it ever has before. Its dominion over rings seems to get closer and closer to our own heart center over time. It wages its trench warfare against real spirits and digs an inch a day. Maybe with technology, a lot more than an inch a day. Its patience, though, is not human over time. It begins many projects knowing it will take many lifetimes and generations of minions to finish the project. Have your friends and family fallen under the spell of the Nothing? It certainly seems so. Has their inner ring been compromised? We need not worry about it. I assure you, We are immune to its influence as long as once in a while we polish a little armor and oil the sword and don't completely let our guard down. If you're reading this book and interested in this sort of thing, we are immune to it. Actually, it's a good thing you and I are already awake, because the process we are going through now seems to be getting harder as the months pass, even though the stage show on the Ship of Fools is further breaking down into a bozo show. It's a strange phenomenon that we're witnessing. In a way, it's getting easier for us because of its absurd presentation, but we can see that for some reason, it's getting harder for the people around us to see the show. We ponder, was its news stories and its politics always this absurd? Or does it just seem more absurd today because of our new perspective? That's an interesting debate for another time, but it wants us diving into those weeds. Your best friend watches the State of the Union address and sees a president standing in front of a sleeping Speaker of the House. When we watch the State of the Union address, if we can stomach it, we see Bozo standing in front of the symbol of tyranny, the fascia. Of course, our perception is not shared by most. Our spiritual aspect has jumped ship, and there are actually metaphysical ramifications for the choices we have made compared to the choices of our friends and family. Because so many people are losing to our adversary, which is the screen, we tend to have the false hope of becoming lifeboat salesmen on the decks of the Titanic. Early on in our journey, we can't understand why almost no one is interested in stepping into the lifeboats that we offer. We see water pouring over the sides and the nose going under. The people on the decks walk by us with their feet wet, giving us dirty looks for peddling our empty boats. We offer the safety to them for free, but there are no takers on the ship. Millions of people in government and other forms of authority willingly and unknowingly build out society so the screen can meet its quotas and reach its energy goals. The outer ring of reality reaches in toward the heart center of real people, your personal reality bubble, and asks you to shake hands with it. If you want its rewards, you must invite the nothing inside your personal reality bubble. If you want to be a success in this place, one must reach out from the heart center and shake its cold, slimy hand. Again, the great news is for you, you have to let it in. It has no power other than what we give it. This is proven because we know it must operate through a trick. That means you and I hold the stronger hand in this card game. We all know that Paul McCartney Wings song. Somebody's knocking at the door, somebody's ringing a bell. Do me a favor, open the door, let him in. When I hear that, I always think something that would be very strange to most people. To me, that's this thing, knocking on your heart center reality bubble. It can't break in. Paul asks you to let his friend in. He says, do me a favor, open the door, let it in. I think the song's good, but it's creepy as hell to me. If you let him in, it's up to you. Don't let it in. Board up your ethereal windows. For starters, letting it in means you have chosen to turn over your energy to it. It cannot create its own energy like you can. It needs your life force, just like what that thing in the closet needed from Carol Ann in Poltergeist. Is that really what I think the Paul McCartney song is about? No, probably not. But Paul's a mega creep, so it's possible. It's possible it's his ode to the screen. Who knows? Many songs carry a dual meaning. And who the hell's Uncle Albert? We're so sorry. What we so sorry for? What'd you do to Uncle Albert? And what's hands across the water? That's like the screen again, reaching in. Hands across the water, reaching into reality bubbles. Oh my God. I'll never listen to the Wings the same again. The outer ring of reality, or the screen, is out to hide your spiritual needle in its haystack until the day you die. Your job on earth is simple, to find your own spiritual Easter eggs. We all believed in the screen's presentation for most of our lives because that is where trusted authority led us. It says, go to college and get a good job. Then go $500,000 in debt, you poor devil. And if you add up school plus car plus house, then they say, go hither and work like a dog to pay back your loan with the money that was made up on a computer the day we gave it to you. Oh yeah, and if you miss 1 month paying back the fake money that we didn't do anything to procure in the first place, we'll take your shit. You should feel lucky we let you have such things in the first place at such reasonable terms. Now get out there and get to work, you poor devil. We all were fooled most of our lives. We believed in the news. We believed that the people we were told were the most intelligent, like Nietzsche, for example, actually deserved the praise they got from academia. We believed the men with bronze statues and marble busts, like Cecil Rhodes, were great people. They were not great people. They were troglodytes. As we woke up, we found out that those great men and great people are spiritual derelicts who serve the various systems of the screen. People like Isaac Newton are geniuses by most definitions, but intellectual capacity is irrelevant and sometimes inverse to the only thing that matters in this place, the spiritual journey. Paul McCartney talked about letting something in. That's something in, from his perspective, probably something pretty creepy, but we can transmute that. We could turn that song into whatever we want it to be. To me, it's let all aspects of myself in, something that's not here but is still part of me, as we've talked about recently. Maybe we need to let that good part of ourselves in here via affirmation. Maybe it's been cut off by our adversary. Don't forget what we talked about a few videos back. If you sense something needs to be done, like Picard said, just make it so. Do the affirmation. See to it. Don't underestimate our adversary or take any chances. You don't have to add the obnoxious "because I said so," but I like to say that. Here's a simple rule. It seems the smarter one is, as measured by intelligence in this society, the more susceptible to the trick they become. So the Stephen Hawking types who can do multivariable calculus, whatever that is, are the most likely the ones to be fooled and spiritual flunkies. This is a repeating theme in this entire reality. The screen loves these super geniuses like Einstein and Newton because they masterfully contribute to the master ruse. For example, in the movie A Beautiful Mind, John Nash laid out a method of world collusion that would dominate until the AI was fully ready to inject its trillions. Now it's likely the AI moves the chess pieces without anyone in a body making any decisions at all anymore. Heck, like war games and the Whopper computer in war games showed us, what exists now may not even be able to be unplugged at this point. Let's hope we exit this game before it evolves into Am from Ellison's "I have no mouth, but I must scream," which originally was a quote attributed to Hillary Clinton's junior prom date. As most of you know, I was a child of this matrix, and I worked for a big insurance company before the stalled century. I thought that materialistic stuff was what life was all about. After I bought my house in 2002, it was important to ponder what type of car I could still afford with nothing left. I believed Osama Obama was the bad guy, and it was my duty to vote in every election. What does Katharine Hepburn say in the movie The Aviator? "It's your sacred franchise." Oh yeah, I forgot. I was a spiritual idiot like most people. I wasn't exactly McLoving my job in the corporate world, but I was convinced I was on the right path. I told myself I should be loving the money that was starting to come in after the job promotion from Los Angeles to San Francisco in 1999. But deep down, I certainly knew that none of it was satisfying. It didn't take me long to get fed up and desire something more. I hadn't done a day of truth research in 2002, but I called my boss on the phone and said, "I quit." It wasn't quite like that. Even then, I thought California was an insane asylum. I left San Francisco to return to Pennsylvania with no job lined up. People thought I was nuts because in 2002, I was just starting to, quote, become successful in San Francisco per what society puts forth as a winner. The job I finally got outside of Philadelphia was at an even worse insurance company, and I only lasted 8 weeks before I was fired. Looking back, I know for sure what happened. My resonance and aura had become sour to corporations that serve the screen. Frequency in this regard is not just a way of putting things, it's very real. Corporate culture based on the personal vibrations of those who work there and potentially its egregore is very real. Whether you believe in the concept of egregore as a thing in and of itself or not, the concept is expressed by corporate culture. The frequency of that place was alien to my new self in the process of waking up and leaving the ship of fools. When that happens to a real person, most large corporate settings become hells. In many ways, I was starting to reject reality before doing a single day of 7-Eleven job application research. I had lunch with an old coworker sometime around 2016. She had no idea what I investigate or what we're interested in, didn't know about the YouTube channel or anything like that. I was just an old friend to her. During the lunch, she complained to me about how toxic her new workplace was. After listening quietly for about 10 minutes, I simply told her there's a simple reason for her endless troubles at work and horrible dissatisfaction. I told her that she was likely one of the only real and genuine people there at her work. I put it in terms of frequency and her being a person of a certain vibration with a frequency that did not mesh with the company. It was simple. As a good and real person, she was like a literal alien inside that spaceship. Now, she was not one of us, a researcher or a truther, but for some reason she understood what I told her, and she became very accepting of this, knowing deep down the situation was not her fault. Being the person she was actually causing the problems, because she was so good was actually causing the problems. Being entrenched in society, she would never think in such ways to look for the solution there. But she felt it from an inner knowing perspective when I told her about that. She was like, yeah, that's it. She immediately went, that's it. And it was like I was happy to show her something she never would have considered. So never go against your gut feeling in this regard. Whenever you sense you're inside a toxic environment or with a toxic group, move away from it immediately. Give the same advice to young people on a job interview. Tell them to stop worrying about impressing the person conducting the interview, but instead spend most of their time sensing the vibration of the place, the aura of it, the overall feeling of the place they're looking to work at. Being inside the employer's building for the first time in the interview, sense if they'll be able to mesh with the radio station silently playing there. If they get the feeling in any way that it's toxic, the job should not be considered for any amount of money. It will always end in failure if one ignores their gut. I would give this advice to young people if I knew any. When I got fired from that job in 2002 and certain groups of people became very unpalatable to me early on in this century, I didn't know the reason for what was happening. Unaware of the process I was going through myself, I was actually taking small steps to separate from the illusion of this world before fully diving into our sort of research. Of course, a few years later, when the 7-Eleven job application videos started coming out by the thousands, I was hooked. Forever a reality junkie. It was fascinating to finally get proof that this reality is not what authority says it is. I had never fully meshed with it. Real people are never satisfied by the superficial horseshit pursued by most of their friends. Unfortunately, our group may always be very tiny when compared to the overall population. We will continue to be outcasts. There will be many occasions where we have to step back aboard the ship of fools, like attending a wedding, for example. When you re-enter Donald Sutherland's San Francisco, blend in the best you can, like the woman in the movie who learned how to act like the body snatched. Make a game of it. When your cousins complain about Biden and they wish for Trump and start citing Q, play along. It's fun. These Donald Sutherlands don't take well to having a truth bucket thrown in their face, and unless you want an entire table of people pointing and screaming at you at the Thanksgiving table, keep quiet and blend in. Say nothing more than, pass the mashed potatoes, please, or you could say, those Eagles really suck this year, and I hate the coaches. That's all fine. Other than that, keep to yourself or they'll put you in a pod. Thanks for listening.